Glenn Loury here. This is the Glenn Show. We're the black guys at bloggingheads.tv. Glass is way more than half full. I think the fact that chattel slaves become citizens of the country, I am not excusing anything when I say this. I'm putting it within 1,000 years of political history. Become citizens of the country within a century. So much so that they can have outsized influence on, and we do have, on the culture of this country. We drive a lot of national narratives here. The American story is the Black American story to a very significant extent. The reason that we have a global footprint in terms of culture is largely because of the cachet and the spirit of African-American humanity, which shines through in the American cultural nexus. It shines through on the basketball court and the football field. It shines through in the music studio and on the camera. It shines through. We're powerful people. We're not weak people. They do recognize our humanity in the main. I am aware of mass incarceration. I know you know that I'm aware of mass incarceration.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not telling a cheerleader story here.
That's right.
But what I'm saying is that the gross national product of Nigeria is about $1 trillion, and there are 200 million Nigerians. There are 40 million Americans in a country with a $20 trillion gross national product. We're rich. We're not poor. We're rich. Viewed in appropriate perspective. I think we can dwell, if we want to, with certain people. I won't name names because it's not about calling people out, who write books which basically say that they don't see us, they don't see us. But I think, again, that's the easy way out. They do see us in the main, not without the issues that we don't want to lose track of. But it's the wrong way to see the problem, to say that they don't see us. And again, I think it's taking, you say the agency versus, victimization thing is, you want to frame it a particular way. I think it is the question, man. I mean, I think, we talk about disparities. Look at the family. Look at the structure of the relationships between men and women, which is the context within life is reaffirmed and reproduced. You can't say it's healthy. It's not healthy. Now, that's on us. That's on us. And actually, it doesn't matter at some level what these forces are, because if we don't man up and woman up, so I know I'm repeating myself to a certain extent, but you asked me to respond, and that is my response.
No, but I think it's a very crucial one, because I think when Teodros raises the question of how do we talk about a love supreme in the context that you just laid out, though, Brother Glenn? See, I would use Hegel's language. I would say Black people are a world historical people. We are a great people precisely because in the face of 400 years of chronic hatred, we keep dishing out the love warriors who at the highest level exemplify love supreme. See, that's who Martin King is. That's who John Coltrane is. And I keep saying is because the legacy is still alive, the spirit is still there. You see, that's who Sarah Vaughan is. That's who Ida B. Wells is. That's who my mama is. Now, at the same time, though, and this is where I think the complication begins, that we also have to be able to tell a story about why it is that our world historical footprint, on the one hand, which is undeniable, still does not translate into the masses of Black people living lives of dignity and decency. And part of that has to do with Black cowardliness, Black complicity, Black complacency. And that's a human thing. And at the same time, it also has to do with predatory capitalism. It's got to do with vicious legacy of white supremacy and male supremacy. All of these factors and elements are operating such that our world historical print, and I think part of our world historical print is because we're in the belly of an imperial beast. It's the Americanization of the world that enabled jazz and hip hop to become the cultural expressions of the world of the youth because of the disproportionate amount of American influence, American power, and we happen to be on the inside of that power and influence and happen to be much of the democratic leaven within the American loaf to help make the place more decent, more democratic, and so forth. So that all of these different levels and registers and dimensions have to be attended to in order to keep track of our humanity. And yet, I do think that this issue of Black humanity is a very, very profound one, because, and in some ways it's true for human beings across the board, but especially for Black folk, because we still cannot downplay the degree to which the levels of hatred and taught to hate ourselves, the levels of doubt, taught to doubt ourselves, the levels of disregard, taught to disregard ourselves, are still operating inside of us. The white supremacy inside of Black people.
So in 1984, the New Republic published an essay of mine called A New American Dilemma. And in that essay, this was kind of my coming out piece as a neoconservative way back. And in that, I made a distinction between the enemy without and the enemy within. So the enemy without was white racism, and the enemy within was African-American problematic internal dynamic of psychology and social connection.
That's right.
Manifests itself in many different ways.
That's right.
And the new dilemma I was arguing was basically that the locus of the problem has shifted from the enemy without to the enemy within. I'm not asking you to agree with that. I'm trying to make a different point. There was an enemy within Glenn Loury. The personal locus of my own spirit and being was diseased, scarred. The connection between that phenomenon of living in the world honestly with oneself on the one hand, and the political issue was one that I had not yet begun to even think about trying to draw. I'm again, because I'm reflecting, because I'm trying to put my finger on some core kind of moral, factors and loci of responsibility. It's a self-regard. It's a self-reflection. Yes. I wanted to be honest. I wanted to be critical. I wanted to get to the root of things. So anyway, thanks for allowing me that.
No, but the fascinating thing is, though, not just I'll get personal too, that you see, one of the things I learned in vacation Bible school is that all of us are thoroughly diseased on the inside. It's just a question of what form it takes, of greed and hatred, of envy and contempt, of hypocrisy, and that disease quality of who we are on the inside must be unflinchingly confronted. You have to be honest and candid about that. You remember that wonderful essay by Kierkegaard, one was saying, I wish honesty was a Christian virtue, not just faith, hope, and love. That was one of the last things he wrote. And Rabbi Heschel actually has a wonderful reflection on it in his last book, Passion for Truth. And I agree with that. That honesty, that's more Socratic than it is prophetic in that sense. But it's crucial, it's inescapable. But given that, the question then becomes not to allow our sense of just how diseased we are to becloud what we can see and feel, i.e. love, and act, i.e. courageous struggles for justice. That those particular consequences of seeing more and feeling more deeply and acting more compassionately and courageously go hand in hand with our sense of being diseased. It could be white supremacy inside of us, whatever it is, whatever form it is. But it's basically hate and greed, I think, in the end. But the thing is, once you confront that, and back to Brother Teodros' point, one of the reasons why we love our musicians is because within the context of the Black community, who has been more honest and unflinching in terms of coming to terms with the hounds of hell inside of their own souls than a Robert Johnson, than Aretha Franklin, than a Billie Holiday, than a John Coltrane, a Donny Hathaway. These are not just figures and entertainers. They are soul wrestlers in the Keatsian sense. Soul wrestlers, folk who are being so candid about who they are as human beings with Black flesh in a world that refuses to in any way be a world that they think they can't wrestle with. Refusing to be victims in the language of Brother Glenn here, you see. And that's one of the reasons why the Black musicians have become so exemplary in all of their humanity. You see,
I'm thinking about my mother, man.
And the Oscar Petersons.
You're preaching. My mama,
giants, man.
The late Gloria Roosley, my dear mother, and I was under the ironing board and sitting in front of the television and whatnot while she was playing her music, her Dakota State and her Eartha Kitt, her Nancy Wilson, and I mean, and it was all so soulful, and it was a wailing cry, but also a hopeful thing, and it was, it was what you were just referring to, but I was just giving another example of it, of this young woman, single mother.
You remember the moment in Native Son, Richard Wright, about that Richard Wright so flat, Richard Wright just protest novelist, Richard Wright ain't got nothing positive to say. He got moments in Native Son where he's listening to his mother sing in the kitchen.
Yes.
And what does he say? He says he pulls back, but he's so taken by it. He's sucked in by it. That ain't no seduction of a narrow sort. That's a humanity being completely manifest such that little Negro genius cannot deny the very thing he wants to deny.
Amen to that.
And that's who we are. And in the end, that's who human beings are across the board. I mean,